listening to the Devoted Dreamers podcast, and I'm your host, Merritt. I believe God has an unfolding plan for your life, a God-shaped dream just for you. But so much gets in the way, right? Fear, comparison, imposter syndrome. What if I mess this up? You are not alone in those feelings, and I'm so glad you're here for Season 8. Keep listening to gain some transformational tools that will help you release the lies so that you can freely show up in the world, offering your gifts, leaning on God in your weaknesses, and serving His kingdom with the dream He's given you. Hey, Devoted Dreamer, welcome to the podcast today. This is episode 193. And real quick, before we get into the interview, are you here today because you've got a dream inside of you? But maybe you're here because you've been feeling a little bit stuck and you're trying to figure out how to move forward. And maybe you think it would be helpful to hear from some other dreamers. And absolutely, I agree with that 100%. But if you are in that place where you kind of feel like your feet might be just like stuck in concrete or quicksand, like you can't move forward in your dream for whatever reason, if that's you, I've got something new just for you and for that situation to help you take the next step in your God-shaped dream. I currently have a few more 1-hour dream consultation spots available, no matter the stage you're in with your God-shaped dream, because I know we're all in a little bit of a different place, but here are 3 stages that seem to be really common. Just see if any of these resonate with you. Stage 1, you're just dreaming right now. It's that still foggy stage of trying to figure out, like, what did God make me for? What's my purpose? How do I boldly walk forward towards it without really having clarity of what it is? Or maybe you're in stage 2. You've been thinking about your dream for a little while. I like to call this percolating. It just keeps bubbling up, these ideas. You can't stop thinking about it. You haven't really taken a lot of steps to make it real, to commit to it. It's possible you haven't even said it out loud to anyone yet. Trust me, I get that. But you want to move forward and you're just not sure how. Or you could be in stage 3. You've already started out on your dream. You've got a bit of clarity on where you want to go. But you keep hitting roadblocks or feeling discouraged that you're not moving as quickly as you'd like to. And you probably feel a little bit alone, wondering if you've got what it takes to even do this thing in the first place. Okay, if any of those sound or feel like you, my 1-hour dream consultations can get you on your way, no matter the stage. Priced at just $175, you'll get 1 hour with me on Zoom with focused concentration on your dream and some next steps you can take to make some progress. Our time together is designed just for you and the stage you're at in this process. And you'll walk away with a plan and 2 weeks of unlimited text or email support from me as you begin to implement that plan. So if you get stuck right away, as soon as we get off that call, you can reach out and we can talk again. So if you've been wondering what it's going to take for you to move forward and you're ready to do just that, I want you to book a dream consultation with me. And here's the link. Write this down or put it in your brain. bit.ly/dream consultation. I cannot wait to hear from you. Okay, now I want to introduce today's guest. And this was such a sweet conversation. I got to talk to Blythe Daniel. She's a marketer, an author, and a literary agent. She has worked in publishing for more than 20 years as a freelance writer, was publicity director for Nelson Books, and product development for John and Stasi Eldredge. She has her own agency now. The Blythe Daniel Agency, Inc. represents authors to publishers for publishing contracts and to consumers through marketing campaigns. And Blythe and her mom, Dr. Helen McIntosh, they have co-authored a book called Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters. And Blythe and her husband have 3 children and, surprise, live kind of near me in Colorado, which I didn't know before I talked to her. And as a mother and a daughter myself, I just have to say, it was so good to have this opportunity to talk with her about her book. And she reminded me, with Mother's Day coming, I mean, it's still several weeks away if you're listening to this in March, but it just brings me to this moment of like, yes, am I thinking about how I'm nurturing my relationship with my mom and my daughters, of course. We talk about both sides. But specific ways that we can be more intentional in our conversations with those women on both ends of the generational spectrum, and ways that we can open up those conversations in case, if you, like me, those relationships have been a little bit hard in the past. She's got some conversation starters that she shared, and then even what it looks like to talk to young kids in intentional ways. This was such an encouragement. Of course, we also cover Blythe's God-shaped dream, and here's a little glimpse of that part of the conversation. Number one, I want you to listen near the beginning as she talks about her dream to be a missionary and how she's living out that role in places she will probably never personally visit. It's an encouragement that you can be on mission right where you are. Number two, the tension of not allowing your big dreams to become more important than the people God has put right in front of you. And then number three, believing in God's limitlessness as it relates to our dreams, instead of the limits that we often assume of Him that will keep us stuck or stalled out. I can't wait for you to hear this one. I can't wait for you to meet Blythe. She has got such a sweet demeanor and a heart for God. Here's the interview with Blythe Daniel. Hey, devoted dreamers. Welcome to the show today. We have a little bit of a preparation here for you for Mother's Day, which is coming up in May, in case you had forgotten, but it's happening like it does every year. But I connected with Blythe Daniel, and she and her mom have written a book that came out in 2019, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about just Blythe's God-shaped dream. And Blythe, welcome to the Devoted Dreamers podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to join you.
Oh, I am too. And we were just laughing how we'd spent 25 minutes talking about our moms and our daughters. And we'll get to some of that. But I just always dig right into it right here at the beginning. Will you tell us what your God-shaped dream is?
Merritt, my God-shaped dream is to be a missionary. And I've always wanted to be a missionary. And I do this in my day-to-day life as a literary evangelist for the books that God's called me to shepherd in the process for others, and the books that I will write myself. And so it really, to me, is this way of bringing people into God's word through resources that they might not have had access to otherwise. And so I do consider myself a missionary of books and other things written. And so that's my big dream and my God-shaped dream.
I've never heard literary missionary. It's really beautiful. Or literary evangelist. Is that what you said? Yes.
Yes.
So you have your own agency, and obviously you get to work with a lot of different authors. Will you talk about just kind of how you came to this understanding that this is what God has for your life, at least right now?
It starts way back in high school, even when I knew that I wanted to be a Christian working in the media, so to say, shining the light on the word of Christ. And at that point, I was really doing some interviews and working for some companies that had products that were in the news. But I just really started sensing that writing was a way that I could connect with God and with others. And so I really started pursuing more of that. And the opportunities that came as a result was going to work for a publishing company, for a pretty large Christian publishing company, and really seeing that what they did to produce Bibles and books that were going out all over the world, that felt so special to be a part of those messages that were going out into places that I probably will never go to. But being a part of that missionary world in the form of books has just been a dream. And I've been so fortunate to be a part of working inside of a publishing company and then working from home the last 15 years, and having the opportunity to work and raise a family at the same time. I feel so privileged to get to do that.
That feels like a very 2020 perspective on work, and you've been doing it for 15 years. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. My dream was to get married out of college and start a family and then put work next. But the way things worked out, I was in a career well before I met my husband and started having children. And so I knew that God had called me to this work, and yet it made sense to continue the work. But also, I knew I also wanted to be able to stay home and raise my children. I didn't want to sacrifice one for the other, but I certainly knew that I would err on the side of raising a family. And here's the thing, and all the devoted dreamers know that many times you put things on the altar, as I say, where you literally say, God, if this is not of you, if this is not what you have for me, please take it. I put it on the altar today. And I've done that so many times in my work as a literary agent and as an author, where I never want those things, those dreams, to become more important than the God people that He's put in my life. And I say, like, my husband and my children and other family members, because those are people that God has put in my life. And there's a reason that those relationships need so much time. And if I'm sacrificing those relationships, those primary relationships, for other dreams, that's a backwards paradigm. So it is important, I feel like, for me to remember to put my dreams on the altar and give those to the Lord, but at the same time, keep going unless He's directed my path differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. And I think probably a lot of us have been reminded again how important that is in this last year. And it's really encouraging to talk to you, having, your kids are teens and tweens, and this has kind of worked out for you. Like, what are some of the things you had to figure out when those kids were a little bit younger and you were still kind of this mindset that God's given me this work, but He's also given me this family. How do I balance it?
Well, luckily, I am an early morning person. And as you were describing how your husband gets up early and works, that is me. I like to get up early, and I like to read my Bible and have some coffee. And I'm just going to say that wasn't always my routine. A lot of times I would wake up and get right into work. And I would say that I've noticed a big difference in my work, my productivity, and my attitude, when I put Christ first, when I do nothing else. I mean, look at my phone. I will, when I make Him first, it really does have such a huge reward for me. So I've learned to just work early in the day, and then, just maximize when I feel like my best hours are, to work and still be available to parent. But, there's some sacrifices with that. You don't get to see your own friends as much. You don't, I don't really watch TV. There's some things that I've just cut out altogether. So the principle of, if you say yes to one thing, you probably are going to have to say no to 3 other things. So I think we have to be good time managers. And then I just think, watching, even though we're not going to be able to be with our kids all the time. I mean, you can't even be with your kids all the time, and you're with them a lot at home, but know that the times that we are with them are really good and focused. So I try to put down my phone or whatever else might be going on and really focus in on them, so that it seems like the time I am with them is good focused time. So those are just a couple of things that I'm trying to continue to do and do better every day.
And even as you talk about sacrifices, I feel like I have to remind myself, like, that doesn't have to be 100% 24/7. Like, I can watch a movie on the weekends with my husband. I may not be able to do it 5 nights during the week, but, like, figuring out, like, what is the balance of still getting to have a few of those little treats, but prioritizing, like, the relationships with these people are more important than the work. So that's really helpful. Well, and speaking of relationships with people, let's talk about the book, Mended. Tell us a little bit, like, I'm sure the backstory would take more time than we have, but you've written this book with your mom. And tell us a little bit about what's that about.
Yeah, so Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters is a book that my mom and I wrote together really in just as we looked at our relationship and the ways that we needed to communicate better with each other. And also the way that my mom was raised. Her mom had social anxiety and was an alcoholic and angry and all the things that my mom endured growing up and even into her adult years. I witnessed some of it. My mom knew that she needed to do things differently with me as she was raising me and my brother. And so over the years, we've just really tried to, people that would ask us, how do you guys get along so well? We would just kind of give them some things like, well, it's really about like how we've been able to talk to each other and be really open with each other. And so when we thought about putting this into a book, and my mom actually has a counseling degree, a doctorate in counseling psychology. So she comes at it from that perspective as well. But a lot of the things that we have in the book are just very practical ways to open up conversations with each other, ways to, not try to be right in the relationship, but honor the other person, because we always have this need to want to be right. And then not trying to control another person, not trying to control the mother or daughter by what you do or say, but really just coming in and asking permission to give advice, or asking permission if you can share something that you're seeing in their life, or a question or a problem. And so, just humble hearts towards each other is really, I think, our whole mission. And this has been something that we've learned. We didn't just arrive at this, and we think that intentional relationships take work, and we need to be women that model that to our mothers sometimes and to our daughters and others in the household as well. But that's really how it came about, was just seeing the needs around us and looking at our own lives as well.
And as a mother and a daughter, there's just so much I feel like I can take out of what you even just shared. Like, I'm asking myself as you're talking, like, what does that look like with a 6-year-old? It probably looks different than with me and my mom. But yeah, I think you're probably also saying that even with little ones, we can find ways to be intentional and listen well and be humble and admit when we're wrong. And I sure need help with that.
One of the most bold questions that I asked my kids, and I don't remember exactly how old they were. I would say it's been in the last few years, but I would ask my kids, how do you think mommy is doing right now as a mommy? Or I might even ask them, how do you feel like I listen to you? Because when you get a report card from your younger kiddo, they're pretty honest, and they'll tell you, well, I don't feel like you listen a whole lot. I feel like you talk a lot, but you don't really hear me. Or like they'll tell you, and it opens the door to conversations that ordinarily you might not have. But when we are willing to just say, how do you think I'm doing right now as a mom? And as they get older, like I'm finding with my teenager, just for me to be able to do things with her, like go to youth group with her and be a person that's invested in her life around her friends, and being the mom that asks some questions. Like sometimes I'll even say, how did you feel like the message was the other day that we heard from Pastor so-and-so? Or I think the more that I can just even ask her about other things, then somehow our relationship becomes closer through that. And so it's not always talking about the relationship, but it is good to do a check-in, and it is good to talk about your relationship and how you can make things better between you. But sometimes it's just really good to just talk about other things that you're both sensing or experiencing. And you probably are already doing this, and so are your listeners, but it's just come through trial and error, doesn't it? What we need to be able to do as moms.
And daughters.
And daughters too, yes.
Well, this is great. I love that you have written this book with your mom, that the heart behind it is so just encouraging to me as someone who, like, I was the 13-year-old that did not talk to my mom about anything. And I know that she would want those years back for us to be able to do that differently. And so do I. But, all we can do is move forward. And So we're working on that. But I know you had a couple of tools that you wanted to share, some conversation starters and another printable. So can you talk about those for the listener that's like, hey, I need help. Help me do this better.
Absolutely. So what we have available to you, this comes from our book, Mended, but on our website, which is our mendedhearts.com. So it's OUR, mendedhearts.com. We have 7 ways to start a conversation. So this is a printable you can download. There's a lot more of these within the book itself, but these are just things like a couple of examples is what I want is a good relationship, and you are more important to me than this problem or this difference of opinion. Another conversation is I want to be a healthy mother or daughter, but I see signs of living my life through you. I'm asking God to help me detach. How would you see me moving closer to you? Or sometimes it's even good to say, how do you see me helping you, but not controlling you? Wow, that's a powerful one. So there are a number of those that like just real short, as you can tell, they're not long. It's not like you have to plan out a whole day to have a conversation. It's very quick. I mean, sometimes people text their mom or their daughter some of these questions just to start the conversation, or send a video through your phone, just to be able to say, I want us to have a good relationship. We do have this thing between us right now, but what do you think we need to do to make things better? And it's really putting it on letting the other person speak, and it's really letting them say what they think, before we just launch in and give our opinion and tell, well, I think you should do this and this. Like, we're really honoring the other person by asking them to speak first.
Sure. And it's a great act of humility to go to them and say, hey, I want to do better, but I need to know what that looks like. So let's talk about it. That's sweet. Okay. So I will put the link to that, to your website and to that printable in the show notes so that people can go grab that. That's such a helpful tool. And I was telling you earlier, just reading those kind of made me tear up a little bit. So I think we all probably want healthier relationships. So that's a great tool.
Thank you. I do think that we've uncovered, a lot of us, that we want to be healthier since we've been home or in this last year. And, relationships are a part of where we need health. And there've been a lot of distanced families that haven't had healthy conversations. And maybe there's mothers who disagree with their mothers about how to handle things with their children at home, with schooling, or viewpoints on different things, including different political viewpoints. And so I think that we've seen more families become more separate. And in fact, some listeners might be thinking that their dream can't come to pass because now they're home with their children and they're not seeing the fruit of those labors. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're in that boat, that there is a season for our dreams, and there's a season for our mothering and our being daughters, that we're not permanently in these roles of discontent or disruption, but how we move through them, I think, is what's so key, that not only for our hearts, but for our kids to watch and see how we handle things. And, kids do watch how we handle our relationship with our mothers, and they're asking questions and they notice, and it's big for kids to see how we handle some of the difficult conversations with loved ones.
Yeah, I think if you grew up in a house where there was never conflict, you start to believe that people just don't fight, or the opposite, But yeah, these kind of healthy, taking initiative, maybe not perfect conversations are a great way to lead our kids. So thank you both for writing this book.
Thank you. Thank you for recommending it. That means a lot to us. Thank you.
Well, I asked you in the notes if you had 5 minutes to teach just one thing that you've learned, what would it be? I'd love to have you share that.
I often think that we are the ones that are the limiters of our dreams. And God is such a big God, like nothing is impossible for him. And I think often we just predict what we think he can do, but we also need to remember that he is limitless. So taking the barriers off of what we think and things should look like, to let him fulfill these God-sized dreams that we have. Sometimes when I think he can't or maybe won't do something, he goes so beyond my comprehension. And he's so faithful and kind to our hearts that I think we simply need to just expect to see this from him, see his kindness and his goodness. That's one thing that I've really taken to heart over the last couple of years, is just that I think I've put some limits or restrictions on what God can and can't do and how he can move in this area of my life, but not in this area. And I probably have fewer expectations than I should. I probably need to have those bigger God-sized dreams, and not sell myself short, which I think is easy for us to do sometimes just in our seasons of life. But I would just say that following a God-shaped dream isn't necessarily our actions, and it's not all this energy that we muster up. It's really believing in a huge God, in a big God, and knowing that he can bring anything, even the impossible, to pass.
That's so great. You're making me think about, like, would Moses have ever thought about the parting of the Red Sea? No, he would never have come up with that on his own. And so it's a great example of we just do need to trust that he is so much bigger than anything we can imagine, and that he will do things that blow our socks off.
Yeah. And, that reminds me, Merritt, too, of when the Israelites were not even sure where things were going to come from, food sources the next day, and how God provided the manna and the quail. And it wasn't until right before that they got exactly what they needed and that they had extra. They tried to even hold on to that extra, and we know what happened with, they were trying to hoard it basically. And how many times have we done that? But God always provides just when we need it. And I just constantly have to remember that there's manna and quail right when we need it, and it's not going to run out.
Mm-hmm. And he knows exactly when we need it. We don't have to hoard it. That's so great. I love it. Well, I'm sure that your journey has not been 100% easy. So I'd love to have you share a story or just some struggles that you've had along the way where it's kind of forced you to lean into that limitless God and figure out that he is faithful and provides.
I have so many examples of places where I've struggled. And first of all, I would just say, most of our human population, I mean, how often do we compare ourselves, comparison, and not feeling good enough, that I'm wanting to people please rather than focus on what God says about me? Or I do this sometimes where you fixate on a conversation that you had or an outcome that's even out of your hands. And so I constantly go back to that thought of, do I trust God or man? Well, I trust God and I respect man, but it can't be the other way around. And I would also say that the times that I've really leaned in to God, through specific prayers, I know that I've been able to surrender some of the struggles and some of the worries just by saying, God, I need you in this area of my life. And I know that this is what you say in your scriptures. And so being able to talk to God and then being able to quote scriptures and being able to say what you know to be true in the word has been so life-changing, because it's one thing to just pray, and sometimes you feel sort of powerless in your prayers, or it's one thing to read and you're like, yeah, well, this is what this person experienced, but what about me? And so I think bringing the context of those two things together, and just remember, we're not the first individuals that have struggled with what we struggle with. God has been so consistent throughout his word that he's going to be there for us. And I think one event that has really shaped my leaning in has been my mom's journey in her health over the last few years, where we were quite desperate for God to show up for her. And he has. But in our hearts, in the longing for her full healing, there's been a part of us that has leaned in to the Lord, just out of a deeper communion with him, and just realizing that he loves us and we don't just want to go to him when we need something, but like he's always available to us, and he always knows what's best, and he always will provide for us. He will always take care of us no matter what our circumstances look like. And so that area of struggle, of wondering what the future is going to look like, we got through that simply because of leaning into God and just trusting him. And I say that, it sounds sort of cliche, but I really mean it in a sense of like desperately coming to God. I need you to show up. I need to know what your word says in this situation. And that's how we got through. And I know that, you Merritt, with your mom and others that that have some health challenges, it's easy to just focus on the challenge rather than the source of all comfort and peace. And that's what I'm learning. That's my biggest hope. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great reminder, especially since his hands are on all of it. Yeah. That's awesome. Have there been some scriptures that have been like a specific support to you in some of these challenging seasons?
Well, I love Matthew 6:33. I'll list some of these out, and then people can look them up if they want to, but like Galatians 6:8-10, and then Psalm 34:8-10 are just some of my favorites. I think the reason that I love, Matthew 6:33 is just seeking first the kingdom of God. I think that there's so many other kingdoms that we could be seeking. Even great dreamers seek a kingdom of some type of creativity, and that's good. And the but is that let's make sure that we're seeking God first and not for the kingdom that we're trying to build to become more important. And I just love that, nothing is impossible with God, and that he will always provide. Again, when we seek him first, will be added to all those things. So I think those are some of the reasons. And I love, I've really been embracing some Old Testament stories as well this season. For some reason, I've been really drawn to reading in Judges and in First and Second Kings, just to kind of go back and research, like, how did God help his people through some really difficult times, some tumultuous times, and those. Going back and reading some of those stories has been really good for me to see.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love some of those verses too. I mean, you said Matthew 6:33. I feel like that one's stuck with me through a lot of seasons of life. And really like, oh, seek first his kingdom. Okay, right. I need to remember that again. You said something to me in your notes of something that you did early on in your process of pursuing a dream that I thought was fun and interesting, and I haven't heard other people talk about it. So you talk about the interviews that you did with people.
I did. I would say that years ago, I started interviewing people whose jobs I thought were cool, and I took lots of notes. I really wanted to just hear what it was that they liked about their jobs and what they didn't like. And it helped me understand the path that I felt like I wanted to take. So I would say that, I had goals that I would work towards of these different jobs. And so it really helped me to just kind of hear firsthand of what all their job entails. And I think I just was so curious to learn, because some of these roles in publishing and even before that, just in the world of media and marketing, I really didn't know like what all you were supposed to do. And so I would say that I've become a student of other people, and a student of other people's jobs, a student of other people's dreams. Especially as a literary agent, I'm hearing people's dreams come up when they talk about what kind of a book they want to publish, or they want to start a new podcast, or can they use their book on their podcast? I think that anytime that we can certainly ask the Lord for his direction, but also listen to other people and how they've started their journey, just like what you're doing on this podcast. I think that's so good for us to see how God brings things to pass, not necessarily the way that we always envision it.
For sure. And I have to ask, were those people that you already knew, or did you approach strangers?
Those are people that I knew in the industry, so to say. So, I still, whenever I can, I will say, when I sit down on an airplane, if I'm sitting next to you, I will probably start talking to you and asking you what you do for a job. And I've had some great conversations. Sometimes I see somebody reading a book by an author that I know, and I might start it in a conversation. So
that's fun.
I figure, hey, we're going to be sitting here for a couple of hours. I might as well talk to you.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. And what a great way to meet people too, that like, you had no control over who you were going to be sitting next to. It's just God's sovereignty. That's awesome. Well, Blythe, I really love hearing a bit of your story and hearing about your book and getting to share it with the listeners. And thanks for just giving us encouragement that it's possible to pursue a dream and still have a family and be a mama and be a daughter and love all those people to the best of your ability. That's really a sweet encouragement. And I would love to have you close us our conversation today, just as you look back over the many years from when God gave you this dream to be a literary evangelist to now. How has He transformed you?
I would say that He has brought such joy to my heart in worshiping Him and serving Him and loving Him that I have a passion for God that's been increasing more and more over the years. And I think that's just come through seeing Him faithfully love me and take just the little pieces that I can offer to Him and multiply them. And we have gone through some seasons where we've been more dependent on Him, just to even, all of us have, to get up and breathe and live and function. And so I just have seen this sweetness and closeness and I believe that I've really been able to say to God, I want your will above my own, that like, if you need to close this door, that's okay with me. And if this is not a person that you want me to be in relationship with, to help with their projects, then please don't let that move forward. And I think that would not have been a prayer I would have prayed in the early days. And so I think that just learning how to be able to, here's the thing. I think it's like I've learned that God doesn't always give us what we expect, but it's what we need. And I'm so grateful that God didn't give me what I wanted sometimes, because He knows best and has far better understanding of what will fulfill our lives more than we know. So I'm thankful that I can continue to hear from Him, and then just continue to proclaim Him to all the people that I can in the different settings that I'm in.
Thanks for listening today. Don't let the conversation end here. Let's connect over in the Devoted Dreamers Insiders group on Facebook. We're building a sweet community of dreamers, so no one has to walk this road alone. You can find the group at bit.ly/dreamergroup. I'll see you in there.